Welcome, welcome. Today we will be doing a TypeScript tutorial of how to build a basic web application using the Express library. So before we get started, we'll need to open up a directory in VS Code or the text editor of your choice. And I always have a couple of kind of boilerplate files used whenever I'm doing a TypeScript project. The first is TypeScript config. So we'll need a compiler. You'll feel free to copy these directly, but these are kind of my settings for TypeScript that I like. And then some VS Code settings. So we'll take a look at the settings first. So once we compile TypeScript, we create our JavaScript and our maps. I don't like to look at those; it clutters, my directories. So I like to hide those inside of VS Code. And then I like to run whatever project directly using VS Code's debugger. And so I create a launch task in launch.json. It'll be a node, and I always have name my TypeScript file that starts the project main. And so it will basically just use node.js to launch main.js. Alternatively, if you don't want to run a debugger, of course, you can just type in the command line, node main.js, and that will execute the same program. And then for tasks, I don't want to have to always worry about compiling, and so I do create a TypeScript task for the TypeScript compiler and just have that running in the background so that I'm continuously compiling my TypeScript. And then I also put that back in the launch as a pre-launch task just to make sure that it will run before the first, when I launch, it will run automatically. And so I don't have to worry about forgetting to compile my TypeScript. Okay, so we'll get started. So we're going to build a web server. So let's create our server class. So we will just call this class server. And it will have just the one class variable, which will be our app. And as we said earlier, this will be an Express application. Oh. Okay, and we already have a compiler error here, so let's get that corrected. So there is no Express. We need to import that. So great, we still have a compiler error, and that's because we haven't installed the package. And so my third piece of kind of a boilerplate file is the package.json, which we use for every TypeScript project as well. We will call this package Express getting started, version 1. And then I have a couple of scripts. I don't actually use these usually because I just use the launch task. But if I wanted to explicitly, run in a start or compile, I'll add these as scripts as well. Again, just node main.js will start it. And this is where our compiler lives once we install the compiler. So we already see two different dependencies that we need to add. Our compiler, which is contained inside the TypeScript package, as well as Express. So let's add TypeScript first in dependencies. And we can use the latest version. Let's also add Express. Version. We'll also need two other packages here. So we see that we use Node to run. Most people have Node installed on the computer, but if you're going to containerize this application, you want to make sure Node gets installed. So we can use nodemon. And then we'll also add types at node. Okay, so that should solve our compiler error, as well as make sure now we have a compiler and everything that we need. So we go back here. No, so we have to actually install our package, of course. We can't just add it to, so let's open up a new terminal and we install everything in the package by running npm install. Okay, and while that runs, we can continue to work on our server class. Oh, well, that finished, so let's see. So now we have our package lock, and we also have our node modules installed. Okay, well, that's cleared. Okay, so now we'll make our constructor. And we'll make a very simple web application. We won't pass in any variables into our constructor. This would be the place, though, that we would add, our port, or if the server needed a database connection or anything like that, we'd pass that in here. But for this basic application, we won't do anything. We will just create our app, which will be Express. Okay, and now our public method to start the server. And this will obviously, well, this will not return anything. Okay, and Express is very easy to work with. It's really just a few lines of code. So this app.listen. All right, so now we have, so this is the method used by Express to start a server. And I just specify the port that we want to listen in. In a production web application, this would be 80 or 443, depending on the connection. But for our kind of locally run, those are protected ports, so we have to specify something else. We'll use 801, and then Express allows you to create an anonymous function here to on success. And so we'll just log out that we are listening. Great. Okay, and that's everything we need to do to have our server. And this will start and this will listen. So let's see. So now we need to create our main, which will actually fire this off. So again, just a few lines of code here. We will instantiate a new server object, which will be server from, make sure we import the right one. So with our auto import. And now our async function here. Which will also return a promise of nothing. And server start. Okay, great. So with just a few lines of code, we have an Express server. It will start up, it will listen on a port, and 9 times out of 10, I always forget my extra pair of parentheses here that declares this as a function and to run. So don't forget that. All right, now with that, we should be able to launch and run our web application. So it'll first compile our Typescript. And I placed And because we launched it with VS Code, we're able to place breakpoints. And as we can see, as we continue, we go into our debug console, we have started a server listening on port 801. So great, we have a web server here. It does absolutely nothing currently, so we'll get it to serve up a static index file. Stop running. I like to keep my HTML files in a folder called public. And we'll just run an index.html. And for the point of this tutorial, we're going to keep things super basic. We'll just say hello world here. Obviously, you can run something more complicated, add CSS, add JavaScript like you would with any web page, but it's not the point of this tutorial, so we'll just, again, keep it basic. Now we can go back to a server, and we need to serve up this raw HTML file, this static HTML file. And so, again, Express, great library, and makes it really easy for you. So first thing we need to do is declare an endpoint that someone can hit our server with. So one way to do that is this.app. If we created kind of a RESTful API, we could have post requests, delete, update. But since we're just serving web pages, it'll always be a GET request. First argument is the path. We'll just keep this at the root path. And the second argument is the function that our server will run when someone hits this endpoint. And this function will always have two arguments, the request and the result, or the response. And for serving up a static HTML file, Express has a very easy to use method called sendFile. And I just specify the path of the file that we want to serve up to the client. Now Express does not allow any sort of relative paths for this file, which is good. Often these things become containerized or are living on a different server. So you always want to specify what the root is with that, and we'll keep this at the root directory of our project. And throw some semicolons on the end of those lines. Great, and now with this, we have, again, just to recap what we've done, created a web server, created a very basic HTML file, and in really just a few lines of code, we added an endpoint and allowed a client to access our server and display. And so let's run this and make sure that we did everything correctly here. So again, this is running locally at host 801. And perfect. We have a fine web server working. Thank you all again. Next time we're going to go over, so we're serving a static HTML file. Often we'll want to, based on either the request or some values in the database, serve up something more dynamic. And so again, we can use Express with another library, and we'll go over that next time, how to create a dynamic HTML file and send that to the client as well. Thank you.